So the theme of today's talk is rebirth is real, conditions to the unconditioned. So it is a bit of a paradox in Buddhism because a lot of Buddhist practice is focused upon being present in the present moment. And people do get a bit confused about it because in a way we try to liberate the mind from greed, hatred and delusion, cyclic existence on a daily basis, on a moment-to-moment basis in our daily meditation and in our daily life. And it is through training ourselves to be truly present in the present moment that will eventually liberate us as we clarify that mindfulness and weaken confusion and delusion. But it is conventional reality that there is past lives. And if we aren't diligent in our practice, there are unlimited numbers of future lives as well, unfortunately. So Lord Buddha does differentiate between conventional right view and ultimate right view. In conventional right view, Lord Buddha explains that there are past lives, and there is heaven, there is hell, and there is karma. Other things like having a debt of gratitude to one's parents, the appropriateness of having gratitude towards parents and teachers, etc. So, but in terms of laying the conditions, for liberation, Lord Buddha also explains when teaching people about meditation that spending too much time wondering what I was in the past and what I will be in the future is actually also an obstruction. So we need to know how to, the right amount of these kind of considerations and contemplations, partly so that we have confidence in the fact that we have to be diligent in sowing wholesome karmic causes, and also be careful not to sow negative karmic causes. Once we have that in place, we understand that it's dana, generosity, sila, keeping our ethical precepts, mental cultivation, chanting, listening to Dhamma, meditating, training the mind. That's what's going to liberate us. But a samsaric perspective is helpful for that. So I thought I'd start with a few stories of things that I know. I like to share, not everybody is in the situation of having been a bhikkhu living in Thailand for 25 years and knowing really great practitioners. So I like to share some stories that I have been privy to that illustrate some examples. So my own teacher, Thanathananan, my main teacher in Thailand, when he was a little boy, when he looked at Buddha statues, when his mum took him to the temple as a 7-year-old, he would get eyes filling up with tears, with some kind of a feeling of loving the Buddha. And a little bit rare as a 7-year-old. And then at school, when there's a song that kids sing in Thai school, which is the Itipi So chant, praises to Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, translated into Thai, but it's very melodic and a bit like a folk song, very beautiful. So as a little schoolboy singing this song in praise of Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, a little boy Anand, his hair would all stand on end, who's actually experiencing rapture, something that you experience, something that trained meditators experience. But here was a little boy called Anand singing a song at school, all of his hair standing up on his arms. And he asked his friends, "Look what's happening. Does this happen to you?" And everyone was around him was like, no, that doesn't happen to me. And so later on in his life, when he was an accountant, most of his spare time he was spending visiting monasteries, and most of his income he was spending on being generous. And he had the kind of thought, well, since I'm spending all of my spare time meditating and spending all of my money making offerings, maybe it would be better just to become a monk. So he did become a monk as quite a young man. When his mum, he visited a good number of teachers, but he visited one of Ajahn Chah's disciples in the area where he lived, and then he decided to go and visit Luang Por Chah. Luang Por Chah was still alive and well and teaching. So he went with his mum. And when he met Luang Por Chah asked his mother, "How many sons do you have?" I believe she had 3. And he asked his mum, "Do you mind if I have this one? Can I have this? Can I have this one?" So I would deduce from that Luang Por Chah had seen something special. He's asking, "I'm going to take this one as my own son." And so it's my belief, understanding that Ajahn Anan was probably born as a stream enterer. So someone who is a stream enterer will have a quality of unshakable faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. They will have a lot of hiriyottapa, conscience, wise fear of wrongdoing. So he's a very virtuous and generous person, basically from childhood, and a very sensitive mind, responding to things related to Buddha's practice with rapture. And so when he began to meditate as a layman, he experienced jhana samadhi, something that most people really, really want to experience something of. And so here is lots of retreats and decades of practice, and a lot of people still not experiencing regular samadhi, but Ajahn Anan did attain to jhana samadhi as a layman. And so a few things that indicate, my point in telling this story is there are certain examples where it becomes clear. This person has practiced before. That's why progressing in practice was easier and faster. A lot of practice had been done. Ajahn Dan, I haven't spent a lot of time with Ajahn Dan, but I did spend 1 month living with him many years ago. And he was a good friend of Ajahn Anan. They were practicing together. Luang Por Biak, Ajahn Dan, Ajahn Anan were practicing together at Ajahn Chah's monastery, and then they helped Luang Por Biak establish a monastery outside of Bangkok, practicing there for a period of years. Ajahn Dan had fallen in love as a young man before he was a monk. And then he came to meditate. And something very interesting thing happened. He's meditating, and he's not deliberately or intentionally doing this, but he saw the image of the beautiful woman that he'd fallen in love with before him. And he saw the flesh on her face begin to rot and fall off, so that there was a skeleton, rotting flesh and skeleton. And the feelings of, I love this woman, I can't live without her, fell away. And a lot of people, I know a lot of monks really struggle with lust and with phenomenon of falling in love, and many of them fall away and try relationships after some time. And so this kind of really trying to see human bodies by the nature of being of the nature to die, become bloated corpses, and for there only to be left skeleton is something that monks actually try to cultivate, because it helps them maintain a celibate life and it helps them stick to being a monk for a lifetime. So Ajahn Dan, without even setting the intention, when he'd fallen in love, when he came to meditation practice, these things happened automatically, but that has to have a cause. So I would deduce that Ajahn Dan in past lives had been diligent with his nature of the body meditation, so that when he came to this life and born in the Buddhist kingdom, started his meditation practice, that those old results manifested very quickly. There's another story, of course, of the Dalai Lama's mother. Now, it's important to understand that the Dalai Lama's mother didn't know that the Dalai Lama was in her womb. She was a poor farmer in a remote part of Tibet. But when this consciousness came into her womb, she could hear the fetus inside reciting mantras. So she didn't know there was a Lama inside her, but she could hear Omni Bami 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 Omni Bami. So the great Bodhisattva was thinking, yeah, I finally get a 9-month retreat, I go, nobody's going to bother me. I get some time to myself. And the Bodhisattva was doing his meditation. So when beings become particularly developed, the Bodhisattva practitioners get very powerful, very developed minds. So they are actually mindful as they die, mindful in the intermediate state, and mindful as they. Lord Buddha explains that. Actually, it's a sutra in the Majjhima Nikaya. I think it's called Wonderful and Marvelous, where Ananda is talking to some bhikkhus, and the Buddha passes by in Savatthi and asks them, what were you talking about? And Ananda says, I was talking about how Lord Buddha told me that mindful and fully aware he descended from Tushita heaven, mindful and fully aware he entered the womb of his mother. And then Lord Buddha says, okay, continue, Ananda. What are other wonderful and marvelous things? And he talks about the qualities, the special qualities of our Bodhisattva who became a Buddha. And I think the sutta ends with a classic wisdom teaching. And remember this also, Ananda. The Buddha, when feelings arrive, the Buddha is mindful and fully aware as they arise and cease. When thoughts arise, the Buddha is fully aware as they arise and cease. And when basically the Buddha is aware of the 4 foundations of mindfulness arising and ceasing. So it's within that teaching, it's very interesting. It's a short teaching, but it has conventional and ultimate reality contained within it. And Lord Buddha is saying it is marvelous, it is wonderful that the Bodhisattva is so developed that he can be mindful and fully aware as he enters a womb. But what is just as marvelous and wonderful is that the Buddha is fully mindful of things as they are all the time. And that was probably a little bit of an admonishment to Ananda to finish his work, because at the time he was a stream enterer, but he wasn't yet fully liberated. So I just wanted to give a few stories. And recently in my life, something interesting's happened. A layman who has an affection for dogs asked me what kind of dog I would like for the monastery, because he sometimes breeds purebreds and trains purebreds. And I said, well, the kind of dog I like is actually a cat. Because we actually have I like dogs too. We have lots of dogs that pass through the monastery. But if we actually had a monastery dog, and they don't bark, you see, and I like that. But if we had because they're territorial, if I had a monastery dog, every dog that passed through the monastery dog would bark at it. And then you have barking in the monastery all day and all night. So I don't want that. I like a monastery without barking. But I do have an affection for Siamese cats, and I have kind of thought a few times in the last 5 years, yeah, I'd like a Siamese cat. I'm living in Siam, And so he asked me, what kind of dog? I said, well, I like a cat. And he did a quick search on Facebook and he showed me, oh, look, this one is a Siamese cat mixed with a Persian cat. And it's 8 weeks old today, can be separated from its mum. And his driver was coming up from Bangkok on that day. And so within 12 hours of when he asked what kind of dog I wanted, the monastery had a new cat, which is a Siamese Persian cross. But what's very interesting about this cat is everybody likes it. Everybody likes this cat. And so it's not that much of a burden for me to take care of, because if I leave, there's people queuing up. Can I take care of the cat? The people want to come in to my guest receiving room and cuddle the cat and change the kitty litter and feed the cat and take the cat to the vet. And so recently the cat got some mold growing on it because it's so damp here in the wet season, needed to go to the vet. And the cat just sits quietly on the chair next to the driver. It doesn't kind of crawl around meowing. It doesn't get anxious. It just sits there peacefully. And so I I did ask a teacher that I know who has special abilities, why do I feel like I want to take care of this cat? Like, I like this cat. Why do I like this cat, and why do I want to take care of it? And he says, well, this cat has merit. This cat has merit. So, well, what happened? He says, so this cat was a human being in its last life, and apparently really liked fish. This guy really liked fish, and he was a villager, and he stole someone else's fish. But a portion of the fish that he stole, he cooked up and he offered to the monks in the monks' bowls the next day. So here you have this combination of got born as a cat because he broke the precepts and liked fish, but he's being taken care of in a monastery because he also made merit. So hopefully, I don't know if I can teach the cat not to kill beings this lifetime. It might be hard, but you can see. I tried to introduce this cat to the other cats, and the other cats are kind of intuitively scared of it. I think it has a kind of a presence of mind, and this cat's kind of fluffy and cute, but the other cats wouldn't come near it, and kind of jumped out of the building where they usually stay, and they're staring in through the window at this cat, like, what is that? So anyway, it can go, obviously beings can evolve and de-evolve. If we make merits, we go on an upwards trajectory. But if we break our precepts and make bad karma, we can go on a downwards trajectory. So that was just a little bit about some anecdotal contemporary stories of masters who obviously laid significant causes in past lives. With regards how we must cultivate to liberate our minds. That's the Eightfold Pass. So the Eightfold Path is also karmic. Basically, this is cultivating the wholesome spectrum of karma, right thought, right speech, right livelihood, right action. It's all karma. When we check our intention, we meditate, we develop clarity, we develop presence of mind so that we can be aware of our thoughts. When we start to be consistently aware of our thoughts, then it becomes possible to be clearer on our intentions and to make sure we keep setting a wholesome intention. But for many people, it's like we have to take quite a few steps backwards to get to that point. We can't start with being mindful of our thoughts and our intentions straight away. There's the power of ignorance and habits and delusion and confusion. And oftentimes when people come to meditation, we are kind of a slave to our habits. And so we have to be diligent in establishing new habits. And what regular meditators notice is that, whereas in the past you might be reactive and get angry and start saying something, as you meditate more frequently, you notice halfway through, you know where this is going. You know that this doesn't help anything. Just stop. And you can stop yourself. And you continue to meditate, and you might be just starting to say the angry, reactive thing to the person who pushes your button. And it's like, blah, 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 and you're like, no. Don't do that. Or it might be the case where there is a conflict or there's a challenging person and it really is appropriate to say something to this person. And whereas in the past, you might just get a head full of steam and just go and tell them because they need to hear this and they deserve it. You're full of justification of why you need to tell your boss this or why you need to tell your husband or wife this. When you develop more mindfulness, presence of mind, reflective skills and nuance, you begin to be able to ask yourself, what would be the right way to say it? What would be the right time to say it? If I said it, would it be beneficial? So it's like extra clarity begins to be established around the way you experience your body and mind and relationships, and you begin to have more choices. And but essentially we have to commit ourselves to a daily meditation practice, and preferably at least twice a day. But obviously for beginners, you have to start at once a day. If you can slowly increase it to twice a day, what you'll notice is that sense of clarity and sense of presence of mind becomes more consistent, and you become more aware of what you're thinking and what you're saying and what you do. And when you come to meditate, you become more aware of your thoughts, your thought habits. If you did something unskillful, you'll tend to feel bad about it. In the past, you might not have noticed that you felt bad. But you come to meditate and you start to realize. For myself, when I first began Buddhist practice, I had a lot of faith in meditation practice. I had a lot of faith in Lord Buddha. That was interesting. For myself as a Westerner, I did a 10-day meditation retreat, Goenka retreat, and I had some peaceful experiences. And I basically developed faith in Lord Buddha, his teachings and meditation. I wasn't yet convinced about the 5 precepts as a 21-year-old. I was like, well, that might just be some kind of archaic Indian idea about morality. I think it's okay to get drunk every now and then. I think if I want to have sex and the other person wants to have sex, I think that's okay. That's probably where young hedonistic people in Western societies start. Of course, when I traveled to Thailand and I was doing meditation retreats and I was making more efforts with precepts, I started to notice that, no, actually, when I break a precept, the sense of clarity, the sense of presence of mind is actually damaged, and begin to weigh the benefits that actually the mind was, because the kilesas, they lie to us. They'll say, you just do this just once and you'll feel better. And you go and do it. If it's against the precepts, you go and do it, and you might get some pleasure, but afterwards you don't feel better. Breaking precepts actually affects that sense of presence of mind, and it affects your confidence and dignity. So you might be able to justify, we justify reasons why we might be able to break them or should be allowed to break them. But when you have truth discerning awareness, presence of mind, and you're paying attention and being truthful to yourself, you will notice that when you break them afterwards, you don't feel good about it. So I had to acknowledge, somewhat reluctantly, as a 22-year-old, hey, guess what? Looks like Lord Buddha knew what he was talking about. The 5 precepts are actually important. They do support meditation practice. And when I break them, clarity is less. And when I keep them consistently, the mind is more likely to experience peaceful meditation states. And Lord Buddha explains that peace is the highest happiness. So you can get fleeting sensual pleasures and you can have peak sensual experiences, but that's what it is. It's a pleasure that is fleeting. And it kind of has a bitter aftertaste and conditions craving for the next one. And then you always have to go higher. It's somewhat addictive. Once you get used to a certain pleasure, you need more of it. You need something more exciting. But with meditation, the contentment and peacefulness and well-being that you feel deepens with practice, and there's no bitter aftertaste from having a 20-minute period of feeling contented and full and peaceful and serene. If we are diligent and consistent, then it deepens and deepens. But as I was saying, we have to establish the meditation habit, because that is what's going to establish clarity and presence of mind, truth discerning awareness. And then we can get to the point where we can start to be aware of our intentions before we speak, before we act. Change our intentions if it's unwholesome. Establish a wholesome intention. Be careful with even our thoughts and our speech and our actions, because it's the being very diligent in cultivating kusala karma, wholesome karmas, and being very diligent in restraining the akusala, the unwholesome karmas. This is Lord Buddha explains that his teachings lead to heaven and beyond. So in a way, we have to train ourselves to be angel-like, deva-like. That's what, in our behavior, that's what leads to heaven. And it's once you have if you're consistently generous, consistently ethical, meditate frequently, you will have a human body, but a deva's mind. And it's with this foundation of a deva's mind, that's the mind that is ripe for insight. So it's when we have these foundations, regular practice, generosity, the merit that comes from being virtuous, a metta practice, various things. Lord Buddha explains the mind that has loving kindness concentrates easily. A mind that concentrates easily is a mind that can be applied to investigation, or is more easily to notice arising and cessation, having insights into impermanence, not self, etc. So we need to try to establish our mind at first to be genuinely human being. That's keeping the 5 precepts and being ethical and being a good person. As we deepen our practice, actually, the mind is the mind of a deva. So you may experience, when you're chanting, feelings of rapture, listening to Dharma talks, a great gladness, joy that comes from listening to Dharma talks. And then when we really start to feel grateful for Lord Buddha and what he gave us in laying down this path and practice and all these teachings and skillful ways of explaining things, helping us to come out of our confusion. When we really get that, we start to feel tremendous gratitude to Lord Buddha and those teachers whose teachings we resonate with, who have helped us. We can think of them, and then the mind can, your eyes can weep with joy, and you can just feel. For myself, when I go to, one of the reasons I love to go and practice in Bodhgaya is just looking at the Bodhi tree and looking at the Vajrasana and thinking of what the Bodhisattva did and what he accomplished there. I can gladden and make my mind very bright and very happy. And with that foundation of rapture, gladness, gratitude, faith, respect, love, all of these wholesome qualities, then it's possible to meditate 10 hours a day quite easily, because you have this. I've done a lot of that in Bodhgaya. 10 6-week retreats many, many years ago, starting with 6 hours meditation a day, working up to 8 hours. In recent years, 10 hours meditation a day for 6 weeks. But it's that foundation of gratitude, love. The mind might get a bit kind of grumpy, or a lot of noise, or bad smells, or insects, or heat. Open your eyes, look at the Bodhi tree, think of what Lord Buddha accomplished under the Bodhi tree, how much effort he put into that. Then this rapture and gratitude comes up again, and it's easy to continue to practice. So this is this, when the mind becomes like the mind of a deva, we are able to put forth a lot of energetic discipline in cultivating the meditation, so that we have insight. So that in terms of liberating ourselves from samsara, it's these conditions that we have to develop, bring to fruition. Mindfulness, probably one of the most important conditions, because when teaching the Anapanasati Sutta, Lord Buddha explains in the first paragraph that in practicing mindfulness of in and out breath, it's possible to cultivate the 4 foundations of mindfulness just with this one meditation practice. And you can see why, because you come to sit, the feelings of the breath are occurring within the body, within the sphere of the body. So you can be mindful of the body sitting, and then feelings, the feelings of the breath, mindful of feelings, whatever pain arises in the body, whatever itches, tingling, etc., noticing these things. And then you're trying to be mindful of the breath, and thoughts come up. So it's like, I want to be mindful of the breath. We're establishing this clarity, but there's this thought about the past, there's this thought about the future, there's this thought associated with craving, there's this thought associated with irritation. And so sitting there trying to be mindful of the breath with a little bit more presence of mind, you begin to become you begin to notice and become mindful of wholesome dharmas, unwholesome dharmas, neutral dharmas. And you just continue to put more and more effort into your practice. And what do you notice? You notice that they arise and they cease. They arise and they cease. With things that arise and cease, you can ask yourself, is it appropriate to consider this I, mine, self? In others, is it them? Is it a self? And you meditate more and more, cultivating mindfulness, then you develop insight as well as calm and peace. So Lord Buddha explains in the Anapanasati Sutta that through cultivating Anapanasati, mindfulness of in and out breathing, one can develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness fully. And in cultivating the 4 foundations of mindfulness fully, the 7 factors of enlightenment are brought to fruition or completion. And in bringing the 7 factors of enlightenment to fulfillment, completion, the mind is liberated. So it's very clear in that one sutta, in that one paragraph, that if we do this practice enough, but what he's pointing to is that it's the mindfulness, it's this quality of mindfulness This was also one of Lord Buddha's contemplations under the Bodhi tree in the 7 weeks that he was doing various absorptions in his liberation as well as contemplations of Dhamma. So one of those weeks he was sitting under a tree in the vicinity and he had the insight. These 4 foundations of mindfulness, when cultivated, when made much of, lead to the deathless and merge in the deathless. The deathless meaning Nibbana. The thing to understand, however, is that mindfulness is a condition. But it is one of the most important conditions that will take the mind to the place where it begins to glimpse the unconditioned. So mindfulness has this nature of knowing, and it will know greed, and then you can put it down. Know irritation and aversion, put it down. This is, mindfulness joined with right effort, the effort to abandon, the effort to increase, the effort to maintain, etc. So mindfulness, good mindfulness, knowing the wholesome, knowing the unwholesome, knowing the neutral. Eventually, mindfulness is what's going to know Nibbana, ultimate truth. And it will begin to glimpse it in moments and then begin to have experiences of it. And then once the mind knows ultimate truth, a lot of ignorance and delusion falls away from the mind. And the mind knows for itself ultimate truth. But the point we have to consider is, in order for our mindfulness to be good, because everybody has mindfulness, but most people's mindfulness is a bit fuzzy, scattered, challenged, good at times, not good at other times. So understanding that mindfulness is one of the most important conditions that leads us to the unconditioned, then we have to consider what are the factors that support good mindfulness. And that's where it comes back to dana again, being generous. Being generous works against our tendency towards acquisitiveness and stinginess. It also trains, that's the root kilesas of greed, hatred, and delusion, right? So one of them is greed. A lot of energy, a lot of darkness in the mind associated with greed. So when we practice in relinquishing, practice in letting go, some of the darkness of the acquisitiveness and the greed is getting weakened. We're training the mind to put it down. And then the merit brightens the mind. So we're dropping some of the darkness and we're bringing in a quality which is brightening. Ethical precepts, restraining the coarser forms of greed and hatred, that also brightens the mind. And the generosity practice is directly linked. This is something that people don't realize. It's not, some people realize, but we all, I think, could benefit from considering this a bit more deeply. We don't just be generous because it's nice. We don't just be generous because it produces good karma. We be generous because we are training ourselves to relinquish things, to put things down. So a lot of people want to get enlightened, and it's kind of a bit more spiritual materialism. And what we need to understand is that enlightenment is probably more about what you've had this enough spiritual power to be able to put down, what you've been able to relinquish. So being generous trains us to put things down that we want, that we like. It's not that we don't want them. It's not that we don't like them, but we're putting them down because we want something better. Lord Buddha explains that peace is the highest happiness. Nibbana is the highest bliss. That's what we want. So we have to force ourselves to give away stuff that we like, stuff that we want, because we want something better than that. We see the danger. Lord Buddha has these wonderful brief teachings which are very pithy with regard to samsara. See the pleasure, know the danger, cultivate the escape. So when we know the pleasure, I like brownies, I like carrot cake, I like amber malas, but I like my new kitten. But if you like things a lot and you don't train yourself in giving things away, so then you have no choice but to be reborn, because that's the danger. It's like the attachment to the samsara is coming from our craving, our attachment to the pleasure that can be had within cyclic existence. And there's also the negative attachments, like things that we hate and irritate us. That's a negative attachment, but it's attachment. So when we're practicing generosity, we're training ourselves to put down some of our attachment. This is what trains and supports the faculty in meditation to be able to put down a hindrance. Training this faculty of the mind to drop it, let it go. Let go of your attachment to it. Let go of your identification to it. The merit also brightens the mind, all of these things, supportive factors. The Lord Buddha's system of training is very sophisticated, very marvelous, very miraculous, that just understanding that this simple practice of being generous, giving some of your time, giving you some of your resources, giving away things that you really like every now and then, is training you in your meditation to be able to let go of those sticky thoughts, those sticky reactions, those moods that you get attached to, the grudge that you're still hanging on to. The thing that's going to help you to let go of that is your generosity practice, as well as your consistent meditation, which makes your mindfulness strong enough. And similar with the precepts, you have to let go of your desires, don't you? I really, really want to do this, but it's against the precept. Okay, well, you can't do it. So you have to relinquish the desire. The desire doesn't go away just because you've decided you're not going to do it. This is where patient endurance gets developed. You have to sit and patiently endure until the desire falls away. And this is also developing more spiritual power, capacity to sit with mind states until they cease. What happens when you can sit with mind states until they cease? You can notice them arising and ceasing. But if you believe a mind state, oh, I just have to say this person irritated me so much, they've really got it coming to them, I'm going to go and give them a piece of my mind, and you go and say it. Well, then you're not going to see that mood, if you just sat for another hour, would have fallen away by itself. And that whole feeling of I just have to tell this person just goes away by itself. It might come back the next day when you think about it again, what they said that irritated you. But again, if you just sit with it, it will pass away. So enormous benefits come from regular meditation, and on the foundation of generosity, ethics, frequent meditation, we begin to have the integrity of the mindfulness that is going to glimpse the deathless. Mindfulness, when cultivated, made much of, leads to the deathless and merges in the deathless. So what I wanted to emphasize, however, is that it's a karmic condition. So just as past lives are a condition for this life, and this life is a condition for future lives, mindfulness is the condition for ending rebirth. But we have to bring that condition to fruition. We have to make that particular condition very powerful. And the way to do that is through being generous, being ethical, meditating a lot, listening to Dharma, chanting, studying, etc. I offer that for your reflection.